Okay, and then I've created a global variable that's going to keep track of my score. We saw that I was printing that out as I collected my coins. We've got our draw function, so that gets called every single time the computer recognizes there's been a change in state, a change in any of the characters, sort of thing. And inside of that draw function, we can call the draw function on each thing we want drawn, which in this case was my fox and my coin. The update, that's what happens 60 times a second. It goes through and always is checking this. So this is where you have to have game logic. Anytime you want to check for something, you constantly have to be checking for it. And so that needs to happen inside of this update feature. This is essentially almost like a while true statement. A while true would just always be running. This is essentially what that is. I don't really know the difference of why it's different. Maybe one of the things is that it controls how often it's being called. Whereas a while true could potentially go way too fast. Like if you had a faster and faster computer, then the game would be much faster. If you went on a slower computer, then the game would be slower. This way, the update function, no matter how fast it is, it's still calling it 60 times a second. And so this is where I'm checking for movement. I check the keyboard for various options. If I press the down arrow, then my Y value of my fox has an increment of 5 pixels. This is where, for example, on Friday when we were looking at the game buttons, this is where we would add our feature where if red button is pressed, add 5 to the Y. If the green button is pressed, subtract 5 from it. That sort of idea. Okay. In fact, what I started to do, we know that we only had 2 buttons in our boxes here, so I'm actually just in the process of creating a 4th button so we can have our up, down, left, right sort of ideas. So that would be something we would implement later. So not only do I move it in the 4 possible directions. Notice that this is checking if it's both. I could potentially have a down button and then an up button when I just want to try running this. If I hit play, I'm going to go back to a wider screen. Oops. Notice how I'm going diagonally. And that's because I have both a left and a right button pressed. So because I'm going through and I'm checking, I could potentially have both a down and a left pressed, in which case it'll update both the Y and the X. You'll need to decide, is that a feature you want? Do you want to be able to move diagonally, or do you only want left and right? For a snake game, for me, my concept is I think I only want left, up, down, left, right, kind of make it a grid fashion, but those can be changed. But the key idea here would be if I, looking for up, I can make these elifs. So in this case, I'm only going to allow an up or a left. I won't be able to do both up and left. So if I run this again, I go up and left, it's going to allow me to go diagonally. But if I change this to an else if, it's either going to be up or it's going to be left. I cannot do both. So if I run now and I press, I'm doing both at the same time, but it's not letting me do it. It's only one or the other. And so whichever key happened to be pressed first or last, I guess, whichever key was last, would be the last one that it recognizes. All right, so that's a feature. You can decide how you want that. For me, in this game, it doesn't really matter to me. Then I have to check to see. After I have moved the positions, left or right, up or down, I then come through, and this is where I'm checking for my off-screen components. All right, so down here, I'm going to say check if fox off screen. Right, so now I check to see if it's greater than my width, and so this is what is another, again, a nice feature, because I'm basing on whatever width I set for my game. If I alter that width when I go to a different size screen, it's still going to check. If I'm greater than width, that means I'm off screen, so then I reset the X value to be 0 on the left-hand side, and in the opposite direction, if I'm too far to the left, then I set the width to be the actual width of the screen. Does that part make sense? Making sense? And then there is something it's a built-in collision detection. So this is how you're able to check to see if something has hit something. So actors have this feature built in, which is collide rect. So our images are rectangles, even though when I look at my fox, I don't see a rectangle. There are pixels, transparent pixels around this, which make it a rectangle. Same thing would be true for the yellow fox or the yellow coin. Now watch, if I get there, I may not get the orange touching the yellow, or I might. Even though the coin was kind of going in there, it recognizes there's a bounding box around there. So these are called collide rect, and you can say if one thing collides with another thing, then what should happen? Well, in this case, I want to increment my score. My score value, however, is a global. It's defined in my main program here, and I am currently in an update function. So I'm not allowed to change variables within a function unless I specifically say that I plan on doing that. So I say score is global. So now when I start referencing score, don't create a separate score within the function. Use that one from the global global program. I increment my score, and then at that point I have to say, well, if I've just collided with the coin, now let's update the coin position. So I've created a function called place coin. So when I place my coin, that's when I print my score down to the screen. I want to see what I'm at. I then assign a new random coordinate for my X and Y thing. So that's going to basically move it to a new location. This was just to show how the mouse action works. So in this case, if I happen to click down on the mouse, what happens is the mouse basically sends its position. So it tells you what coordinate it's at, and it gets stored inside of the variable called position, which means I can use that position for some other feature. So a position is going to be an X and a Y coordinate. So I can set the position of my coin to the position of the mouse feature there. So if I run again, if I come and click over here, it's going to say, well, that's a X 200, Y 100. It stores that value in the position and then sends it there. And so then I set the position of the coin to that location. Then to get the game started, right, the update feature is constantly checking to see for the movement of the fox, but I haven't actually placed the coin anywhere yet. So I call, as soon as the game starts, I call once the place coin, which is going to set my score. Because I'm running the game, I haven't scored anything yet, so the score should be 0. It should print a 0 and then set the coin to a random location. In actual fact, what might be happening, because I didn't set the coin to anything to begin with, its value would have been 0, 0. But then as soon as I come down, I place the coin, it instantly puts it to a new location. So if I run this now, we got the 0 because it placed the coin. It placed the coin at this position over there. Score is 0. All right, so that's where we're currently at. How many people, because we did this a few weeks back, how many people have actually have written this part of the code? Okay, so not everyone. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you this code to start with, and then we're going to move forward with from there. All right. So I'm going to save my code. I'm going to close it. I'm going to come to my downloads. This is my game 1 there. Whoops, escape. I just made some changes to it, so this is where we're at. So I'm now going to take that and I'm going to compress it. 7-zip. Add to game 1.7z. No, add to game 1-zip. All right, so it's just compressed everything that we had. So I'm going to be able to give you that so that we'll be able to get up and running. So in a game, it's important that we decide what it is that we want to accomplish. Okay, so did I? No, I don't want new game. I'm going to load. Oh, no, I don't need to. So let's talk about the features. All right. So what I'm thinking is I want to be able to kind of start with that game that we've got with our fox. First thing I want to do is be able to create a snake. Okay. In my concept for now, like that fox is too big. I just want to do a square pixel, probably 20 pixels by 20 pixels. And my thought is we'd probably create a red and a green one, or a blue, like two different colored ones, so that ultimately we could have two snakes on the screen. Um, we want the snake so it's always moving. You can't just stay still. That's part of the game, is that it's constantly moving, so you want to try to make sure you don't bang into yourself. So we're going to want it to always be moving. So my goal would be to start with, can we get a snake on the screen, and as soon as the game starts, it's actually moving in one direction. Then we got to do the control, which we basically have already. We've got that control set up, but it'll be a little bit different because currently when I stop pressing my key button, my fox stops moving. We need it constantly moving, and my arrow key is going to simply change the direction of movement. What should happen at the edge of the screen? Should the snake go off screen and come back on, or do we feel like it would be better for that to be a death? You kill yourself if you go off screen. Probably death. Okay. If everyone's good with that. Yeah, I mean, ultimately, we're going to want the snake to get longer. So we got one person speaking for one. Well, I guess ultimately it doesn't matter, right? So you guys, as we code it, you'll be able to make that decision. So you'll make that decision. We've got we already have a coin appearing. We then need the method where the snake eats the coin and the score is increased. That's essentially what we already have, right? And then the next thing would be to add, can we get multiple coins going? And what I did in my logic was I thought it would be interesting to have more coins appear as the game went on. Even if it's not interesting, it does have us going using lists, which is one of our goals. But I think it's kind of interesting. The more points you have at a certain point, a second coin appears. So you get 2 coins that you go after, or then 3 or 4. And I think it could also keep the game interesting because you might have one person that's quite far ahead, but then instantly, they can grab up 4 coins and quickly jump ahead to the next person. So multiple coins appear, and then the next big thing will be, can we make that snake get longer? And so I figure something. We're currently calculating a score. Well, maybe in the same way we could use that score to talk about the length of our snake, something like that. Okay. And then we obviously have to check to see somehow if the snake dies. And so we're going to have to build a snake death portion, which we decide when we call it. We might call it when we go off screen, if that's how you want to do it. Or it might only be called if it bangs into itself or ultimately into another snake. In order for it to bang into itself, what I think we want to do is, with our snake getting longer, snake at edge, coin appear, snake eat coin. Yeah, for the snake to get longer, what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to keep a list of positions that the snake has been in. So if the snake starts here and it's supposed to be 3 pixels long, the next time it moves, we now have 2 boxes of snakes. Moves again, we now have 3 boxes of snakes. And then at that point, we have to be moving all 3 of them as it moves forward. And then, so we'd have to go through and check to see if the head has banged into any of the other parts of its snake. We'd have to go back and check on that. So to start with, snake created, I have, just in paint, created a little, in fact, if I just type in paint. So you can see I've got my little square right up there. That's white. I filled it with, I think I went with a red and a green maybe. And then I save those. If I go to resize pixels, you can see I made a 20 by 20 pixel. So I'm happy to give those 2 images to you as well. So game 1, snake, images, snake G and snake R. I'm going to copy those and go back to my downloads. Put those inside of my images. All right, so the idea is I want to be able to, we're all starting with this sample code, which I'm going to open. Load. Actually, I'm going to cancel this. I'm going to go back to the folder. Images. Fox and coin. I'm going to copy that code. Control C, and then Control V to paste. And now this one's going to be, I'm just going to call it snake. So now when I load my game, I'll load the snake game. And I'm going to start changing my code. So anytime I have a fox, I'm going to call it, what do we want to call it? S or snake. Control F, I'm going to find anytime I reference fox, and I'm going to replace it with snake 1. Should we do that? Or snake 1 and snake 2? Snake 1? Is that good? Okay, so that will be our, and I'm going to replace all of them. And I'm pretty sure anytime I reference a fox, it's now going to be my snake. So I'm going to say replace all. So that all that has been changed. I need to change my, so my actor used to be fox, now it's called snake 1, but the code, the pixel was snake underscore G. So snake underscore G. My coin, my score. So I think all this should now work, but now instead of a fox, it's going to be a small pixel, and I'm going to check that. I'm going to run it. There it is. That's perfect. Okay, so that part's working. Next thing we said, snake created. Perfect. Always moving. So concept, what do we do about always moving? Thoughts? Okay, we could create a function that keeps it moving. How are we going to keep it moving? Hayden?
So I did this with one of my boxing.
Yeah.
Instead of having when you go to like when you change the position of the other one, you did take one dot y. Instead of having plus or minus 5, you set that number to be a variable. So like snake speed, and then later when you go to figure out your directions, you can change it to negatives and you can change it to x and y.
Yeah, so let's see what that would look like. What we're going to do is we're going to create a speed variable, and we're going to do something a little bit advanced. We haven't seen this before. We know we have. We could go with snake 1 speed, snake 2 speed. What we can also do is, well, I guess I can do snake 1, and I'm going to create a variable that's unique to snake 1. So it's like just creating it's almost like this. Okay. When I do this, if I set that equal to its speed to be 0, this is one variable. The difference here is that instead of it being a variable, I'm saying let's associate speed with that snake, and so that snake will know its speed. It also means that it's not global. You know, just notice down here, inside of my update function, I'm changing the y value of snake 1, and I don't have to declare that as a global variable. It's because snake is, we call it an object. We don't really study this in grade 11, but it's called an object, and we have the ability to modify objects throughout entire programs, but throughout our functions as well. So this allows us to basically create a variable that allows us to modify it within the function. So we know snakes have properties. They might have colors. They have positions, x's and y's, and that's built into the actor feature. We're just going to say, hey, from now on, it also has something called a speed, and we'll teach it what that speed means, what it does. So let's go with snake 1 speed x, snake 1 dot speed y. So currently our speeds are set to 0. Okay. Then, as Aiden mentioned, what I'm going to do is, no matter what happens, I'll do it after our if things. Snake always moving. So what I do is I take my snake 1, I take its x position, and I add to that the snake 1 speed x. And I take the snake 1 y, so it's y coordinate, and I add to that snake 1 speed y. So right now, if I do this, I'll get rid of all this stuff. I'm going to say, if it goes right, we want the speed to become positive. So snake 1 speed x is going to become positive 5. If it's to the left, the speed x will be equal to minus 5. So if I try running this right now, it's not going to move because our speeds are set to 0. And I come in here and I update, and I'm always adding 0 to the x speed and 0 to the y speed, so to its coordinate. So the x and y is going to stay exactly where it is. If I run that, let's see that that's what happens. It's not doing anything. But now, if I press the right arrow key, it's going to change my speed x to be 5, and then it's going to say take the x position and add to it the value of 5. So that should move it, and then it's constantly updating, so it's constantly going to be adding 5 to it. If I press the left button, then it's going to change that 5 to be a negative 5. When it comes down through here, it'll say snake 1 and add to it minus 5, and that's going to have it move in the opposite direction. And it's going to constantly be going, no matter what I do with my keys, it's always either going to be going left or right. So as soon as I press left, it's gone. If I press my right button, it's going back. So no matter what, because we're constantly updating its speed, it's always going to be in motion. And then what we're doing here is we're simply changing whether it's positive or negative. For my purposes, I want to make it so that the coin only goes left, right, or up, down. I don't want to go with a diagonal motion, which means that I might as well stop my game. I'm going to do the same thing here. Speed y, if it's going up, that's got to be minus 5. Sorry. Snake 1 dot speed y is equal to negative 5. And if it's going down, then that's going to be positive 5. Snake 1 dot speed y equal to positive 5. So the downside with this at the moment, and I'm just going to run this, I'll get my up and down working. I can go down. So up and down is working. What's the problem going to be right now? What's going to happen if I go left or right? It's still going to be, even though I go left or right, you can see it's still going down. Right? So if I want to avoid that, what I also need to do is I can only ever have one speed. So, sorry? I don't need to do LF. What I'm going to do is if I have set my Y speed, if I've changed my Y speed, then what I want to do is I want to take my X speed and do what to it? Not break? Close. I don't want it moving in the X direction. So what would I put? I'm just going to set that to 0. So basically, if I go down, that will allow movement, positive movement Y, but it's going to set my X's to 0. So whenever I make a change to my Y speed, I've got to set my X speed to 0. And then in the same fashion, if I set my X speed to be left or right, I've got to set my Y speed to be 0. So if I run this now, I now have up, down, left, right. And if I'm pressing both, it doesn't, it's either left or right. That's all it is. Okay, does that part make sense? So what I want to do, I've recorded this.